Good morning, you're just in time. We've got a little processing going on behind the scenes. Pistol is here and we're just finishing up his microcurrent treatment. And I actually just had to excuse him. He was giving me some indicators that he needed to relieve himself. And so even though he has tape around his hocks and it's not necessarily comfortable for him to move, he allowed me to back him up outside of the barn, out into the grass, so he could do his business, and then I led him a few steps back into the barn so we can continue with therapy. So anyway, this is Heather Smith with barrelracingtips.com, and basically I'm coming to you, and I have been coming to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning with an episode of Pistol's Progress, because your success is my goal. And I thought it would be fun, since I am in the beginning stages of bringing Pistol back into conditioning shape after many months off, to show you a behind the scenes look of what it looks like to actually do that. And so again, I'm being like really conservative and starting with some several weeks of ground conditioning. And but there's so much that we can gain from doing that, and so much of it that applies to what we do on the barrels. So no matter what stage you're at, the things that are going through my mind and that I'm working through are certainly things that are going to apply to what you're doing right now as well. And so in addition to being the creator of barrelracingtips.com, I have also written a really special book series that I often refer to and would love for you to check out. But today specifically, my plan was actually to go live after Pistol's session. He sees something outside of the door here. I'm not sure what. How about you just, the goal really with therapy is for them to be like just really in the moment and relaxed, and to just really feel and experience and get the maximum benefit from that. So even by just, I'm not saying he might not move his head and get, look at something over there, but just by even asking him to straighten his head, he's going to get more benefit from the therapy, because he's not fixated and focused on something else, where he can just be in the moment and just feel. So anyway, today I had mentioned that I was going to go live after his session, but because he's getting a microcurrent treatment, it's not super hands-on necessarily for me. I had a few extra minutes and I thought I would do it now. What I'm going to be doing this morning is I'll take a few pictures. I'm going to be setting up the Podolettis I talked about, my new toy that I talked about in one of these first Pistol's Progress sessions. And Craig did pick up some small, narrow diameter, like wood posts. I think they're like 6.5 feet long, to make some cavalettis, which is just like great for conditioning stifles and building top line and so forth. So I'm going to be setting those up in the arena today. But this morning I wanted to talk to you about joint supplements. So in Pistol's last session, I noticed that he was still struggling a little bit with sometimes picking up, let me turn that timer off. He was still struggling sometimes with picking up the incorrect lead on a large circle when I was lunging him. And so part of the reason that this was still an issue in our last session is because I was being really, really specific and particular about him being really responsive with his whoa and go. And when I kind of amp up the firmness or the pressure, it makes him maybe a little bit, it causes like kind of a mental disconnection where he's like, oh my gosh, what's your problem? And his focus sort of drifts to the outside of the circle. And so basically, if his focus is drifting to the outside of the circle, the shape of his body is going to be a little bit inside out on that circle. And so then that is going to cause him to pick up the incorrect lead. But on the other hand, I want to absolutely make sure that there's not a physical reason. Now, obviously, he's been off for a long time. He's going to be, not at his most dynamic and coordinated. He's going to be a little stiff. We're working some kinks out. He is 15 years old and so forth. But this is a really awesome opportunity right now, because I do not have like super high pressure, like huge competition goals for later in the year. They're a little bit vague, and that's real purposeful because of some other projects like finishing our arena. I'm completely rebuilding barrelracingtips.com. We need to have one of our other horses ready to go this fall. And so I'm getting him back in competition shape, but I have a lot of leeway and sort of time. And so what I'm doing basically, my goal is to be able to create as much like strength and soundness and athleticism and basically build him physically so that I can be doing as much as I can with as little as possible. In other words, it's kind of like how much great stuff can I create without like piling up like you know, like tons of injectables and supplements and so forth. And so that's when it comes down to, again, like I said, I was going to talk about joint supplements. And so after I noticed he was still kind of struggling with that lead, I thought, well, because I've been trying a new joint supplement, and a lot of people are kind of on the fence about like, do they even work at all, the oral supplements? And I think that there are too many people that have said a raging like yes, that they do make a difference, to just like throw them out completely. Like obviously with things like Adequan and Pentasan, which we do use when our horses are in that stage of their conditioning and competing when things are more intense. Obviously those are things that are proven. You're definitely going to see a significant difference with that. But the more the like soundness and comfort that we can create without adding those things, it's just going to help ensure that when they are at that top intensity and like stress level to their body, that we'll be able to add those things in and then they'll hold together and we won't like run out of those things. And so this is really kind of like a time-consuming trial and error process. And so I went to work and did a ton of research to dive into like the real deal on joint supplements and refresh my mind on some things. And so I want to mention too that in the off season, with our horses right now being teenagers, in the off season, good morning Jennifer, I would love for you to say hello basically, by the way. So those of you that are tuning in, tell me what you're up to this morning. Where are you tuning in from? I would love to hear from you, to say hello. And it's always a good confirmation to make sure these comments are working on Facebook, because we've had some moments in the past where they were not. So anyway, I'll say that in the off season, our horses do also get some oral joint support, and we tend to stick to, I don't like the idea necessarily when it comes to supplements for specific issues. I don't necessarily like the idea of keeping them on exactly the same things every single day, like forever. I think that their bodies can kind of get accustomed to them, and that we need to sometimes mix things up a little bit. So like in the off season, for our horses who are not getting really intense exercise, they get silver lining herbs like a feet and bone herbal supplement, or their joint support, and also turmeric. And just a second, I need to switch that again. And so, and then we add things like supplements that have a combination of glucosamine, chondroitin, MSM, and then also HA. And so here's the deal on those things. A lot of joint supplements will have the combination of glucosamine, MSM, and chondroitin. And the thing of it is that those three ingredients need to be in a lot of experts will say they need to be in a specific ratio in order to be effective. When it comes to these supplements or anything, they need to be also at a quality or at a molecular weight so they're actually absorbable. So having a supplement that's a liquid is not necessarily a guarantee that it's going to be most readily absorbed, but that's generally, you could say that anything that you take that's a liquid is going to absorb quicker than, say, a powder or a pellet. And the thing with powders, the drawback with that is that there's a possibility that the horse isn't going to end up getting to ingest all of it. They're going to sift through it. And then the thing with pelleted supplements is that a lot of times there are additives and fillers that actually create the pellets. And so that's something to notice as well. So the more research I did, the more I found out that with some of the most popular joint supplements out there, those ratios of glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM are really kind of all over the map. There are several resources I found that said it's best to have, I think it was 10-10, which is 10 glucosamine, 10 chondroitin, and 4 MSM, I believe. But then there are other supplements that have like way off the charts level of MSM and then less of glucosamine and chondroitin. And so those three ingredients are mainly for supporting the health of cartilage. And then HA is also really critical for maintaining and improving the quality and amount of joint fluid in our horses. And some horses, depending on what they have going on, might need support in one area or the other. If you've got teenagers like we do, they need as much support across the board as they can get. So hi Amber, hi Lori, hi Kelly, awesome, love, oh my gosh, so many folks tuning in. Love having you say hello. Australia, Ohio, Ontario, love it, love it, love it. Minnesota, awesome. You know, I went to college in Minnesota. So anyway, when it comes to these, I made a few notes so I could, because I had a lot I wanted to cover. So when it comes to these combinations, these like, you know, you have to look at the label. Like I would really like to assume that if the horse is just getting a joint supplement that, oh good, they're covered. But here's the thing, if you have a horse that is kind of borderline soundness wise and you're really looking for something that is going to make a difference, then you should be able to see a difference. So often I think about throughout my career, like yeah, I do notice a difference when they get like Adequan or Penisan. It's obvious. And I can't say that over the course of the years that I have seen like an obvious night and day difference from the oral supplements, but it always like made me feel good. I thought, well, as long as they're getting something, right? But here's the thing, like because of the phase that I'm in with him right now, is that I have the time and space to experiment and really get detailed and specific about those ingredients and really, really look closely. And then find that combination that actually makes an actual difference for the horse. So this takes a lot of time and a lot of trial and error because you might want to keep them on one specific joint supplement for like a month to be able to really tell if it's making a difference. And here's the thing, your horse is probably, if your horse is already sound and doing really well, I mean, you're probably not going to, you're not in a position where you can notice maybe a very big difference. But in the position that I'm in, I have that opportunity to be able to see like he definitely needs support and I'm going to be able to see the difference. But one of the other things I do and get in the habit of is I get him out cold and I lunge him for a few circles on a couple circles on hard ground every morning when I get him out to see how he's moving. So it's really important that you're paying attention to that like as often as possible. And so like I said, what I'm getting into is I'm paying super close attention to the amounts of the glucose, the balance, the ratios of the glucosamine, the chondroitin, and the MSM, and then I'm making sure that he's getting an adequate amount of HA as well. Woo! We've got what I call a unicorn stretch going on back here. So here's the other thing to pay attention to in your joint supplements. So the more research I did, now I have to switch that again. The more research I did, the more I realized that there's a lot of joint supplements out there that have added minerals in them, like manganese or zinc or copper. And these minerals and their ratios are really critical too. And I'm sure they're put in certain supplements because they're believed to enhance the absorption of them. But here's the deal, is that if there are these minerals in your joint supplement and they're getting that level of minerals on top of maybe this like very well balanced, you know, mineral supplement that they're already getting, it could be actually like throwing things out of whack. And that mineral balance is so important. Like one of the things I came across, and I've actually even seen this, is that the joint supplements, often the active ingredients are like sulfur compounds. And I've also seen some research that says that glucosamine can interrupt like a horse's glucose metabolism or something. So I don't know I would have to do more research to get like super clear on this, but basically what it came down to is that long-term or overfeeding of these ingredients can actually negatively impact the health of your horse's feet. So that is something to keep in mind as far as balance. And also the thing, I prefer to steer clear of joint supplements that have a lot of added minerals in them. And so here's the other thing. You want to pay close attention to what they've got as far as fillers and added ingredients. So one supplement we have fed in the last couple years is Actiflex, and it has super high levels of all the necessary ingredients for joint health, and it's a liquid and it's very reasonably priced. And the only like added ingredient, inactive ingredient is like a flavoring. But you want to look at the labels and stay away from things like corn, wheat middlings, things like that, because those can end up impacting your horse in a negative way. And so when it comes to that balance, which apparently after doing my homework, it's obvious that not everybody agrees that there is just like one specific ratio of MSM to glucosamine to chondroitin that is going to work, or that's best, right? Because they're kind of all over the map. So in my opinion, I think it would be best to, with these rules in mind that I've kind of gone over, these things to keep in mind, is to do some trial and error and experimentation. And again, here's the thing: if you set out and you're like, well, I'm going to pick these 3 joint supplements and see which one of them seems to make the biggest difference, you might need 3 months to do that. And you are not going to want to be making a whole bunch of other changes, like major changes at the same time that could influence your feedback and your results. So you can see how challenging this is. But I just happen to be in a position where his workload isn't super intense and I have the time and space to do this experimentation to get Pistol set up with some kind of support that is going to serve him the best. And let's see. The other thing I wanted to mention that is super important is that, and this just goes across the board for anything, whether it's with our own health or our horses, is that let's not be piling and injecting and doing all this stuff and throwing all this like joint support at them that could possibly be disrupting their mineral balance. It could be causing issues with how they process sugar. It could be detracting from the health of their feet. Let's not be like adding all this stuff on top of each other, or even the injectables, if we are depending on them, which it's really important to try to stick to the labeling that it's offered with. Because there is research that says that especially the overuse of some of those injectables can thin blood vessels. And so you think about horses who are bleeders and so forth. I mean, Adequan, Penicillin, all those, they have their place, absolutely. But like I said, that's just another reason, because of all these side effects, some of them that we don't even know about. It's like, let's see through trial and error and experimentation how much we can get out of how little, basically, if that makes sense. Now, at the same time, you don't want to be doing so little that you just continue working a horse that's sore, because that will just bite you in the butt too. You're going to create inflammation and damage, that could have been avoided if they had been properly supported. So again, got to switch the setting. So I don't really intend for these Pistol's progress reports to go so long, but oh my gosh, once I get on a roll, I'm going to really work on that. My intention is for these to be like 5 or 10 minutes. But when I have something I think that would be helpful or I feel strongly about, like, I can't help but not share it, and I want you to benefit from it. So what I was getting to and what I want to wrap up with, I'm just going to take off his gear. I'm going to stretch him, boot him. I'm going to set up my Podaletti system, at which I will take some pictures of, and I will try to post those later. But what I wanted to say is that don't be piling up all this stuff and like unaware of how it could be negatively, the subtle ways over time it can be impacting your horse. Like, be educated, do your homework. And then I want you to make sure that you're doing everything you can, especially like when it comes to joints. So here's the thing, are your horse's feet, are you 100% confident? Is your hoof care program like totally on point? Because if those joint spaces are like wonky and imbalanced, like that's gonna cause more wear and tear. Like here's the other thing, it's really common for people to feed processed feeds with a high sugar and starches that basically just are an inflammation factory. And so like if your horse is way overboard in sugars and so forth, then they're going to be walking around with this like much higher level of inflammation that is going to seem to require you to add all this other stuff when maybe you just need to replace feed more grass hay and a little bit less green grass, or take out some of the processed feeds and replace it with something else. So we'd want to make sure that we're not trying to fix these symptoms, but actually there's something in the foundation that is a major contributing factor to why it's an issue to begin with. And so that's super critical as well. So then we might actually need much less of the additives if we can create a real foundation of balance and health and soundness. I mean, even the way that our horses are ridden. Even if our horse if a poor fitting saddle inhibits their free range of movement and causes them to move in a way that, when they're ridden, that isn't really ideal and balanced, then that's going to cause wear and tear and soreness over time. If we tend to lean to the left a little bit when we ride, again, that's going to create more stress and pressure and wear over time in their bodies on one side. So we cannot leave any stone left unturned, and we have to make absolutely sure that we're doing everything we can from every angle so that we can get as far as we can with as little as possible. So then that means we can just basically have more health and soundness and strength and speed over the long haul, and enough to take us to the highest levels without ever running out of options to support them. And again, building this, it takes time, it takes trial and error, it takes homework, it takes research, it takes a lot of just looking at your horse every day, and noticing any changes. So I hope this is helpful. This has been a lot to process. I wanted to mention there is an article I have at barrelracingtips.com about joint health. And so I bet if you just search for joint health, I can't think of the name of it, but in the upper right corner at barrelracingtips.com, there's an educational article there. And then in Secrets to Barrel Racing Success, my book, there is a chapter called Healthy as a Horse that will offer some great resources as well. So I just want to check through. Yes, there's so many joint supplements. But I would just really use the guidelines that I've offered, look really closely at the ingredients. And, I would never just go buy some random cheap thing off the shelf at the feed store. I really want to go with something that is proven and trusted. I mean, having high reviews is important and so forth, but again, look at those other ingredients and stuff that could actually be getting in your way and inhibiting the kind of progress you want to make. Oh, Lisa, funny question. So these are just braid binders, little rubber bands. And, but yeah, Pistol's sire is a full brother to De Niro. And so Pistol is a grandson of Sunfrost. And that's essentially, let me get that alarm. That's essentially where he gets the long mane from. So as a little fun addition, I rebraid his mane once a week. I try to be really gentle when I brush it out. And I just load it up with show sheen before, after I unbraid it, before I brush it. I start at the bottom, go to the top, and then I rebraid once a week. And so, yeah, pretty fun. I wish I could leave it down, but it just gets to be a mess. And so, funny story, there was one time in an actual run when I go to blast off to the first barrel and one of his long braids snapped back, and the end of it rubber band smacked me between the eyes and the forehead. So they can be, but you can use them for like an over and under too. So, you know, the pros and cons of long mane. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful. It has been a huge mouthful, and like I said, I really wanted to keep these to 5 or 10 minutes. But you know, I have this habit when I'm writing too, and I apologize. I'm aware of it, I'm working on it, but I don't want to hold back anything when it comes to the value I offer you. So these are a lot of things to consider for joint supplements, and I'm going to report back to you on some of the changes that I'm making with him. And it's a really great opportunity I have with him, where it's like, it's not like he has to be like 110% like tomorrow, where my goals or my program with him is a little bit more conservative. I have a little bit more flexibility in time. So I have the time to have a little bit more like trial and error and experimentation. But these are all the tips that I talked about are things you definitely want to keep in mind when you're looking at what kind of joint supplement you want for your horse. And so the other thing I was going to mention too is HA is really important, and not all of the joint supplements that have the glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM also have enough HA. Sometimes we need to add that separately to help support healthy joint fluid. And so anyway, I hope that's helpful. I will try to take a few pictures. My phone went dead on Monday, but I'll try to get a few pictures in the arena. We're just finishing up with therapy, and we're going to get to work. So hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will be back Friday morning actually with some specific notes that I reviewed. Oh, look at this. Whoa! He didn't go all the way down, but he kind of put a foot out and started to do the downward horse stretch. Anyway, I have some super, like really awesome tips for Friday in mind for you. So tune back in around 8-ish in the morning, Friday morning, for another of Pistol's Progress. We'll see you then.